Hello, we meet again today. I'm not sure if I've shown this interest before, but I have taken a liking to both history and archaeology for some time now. But some might seem them as boring. Talking about kings and queens and dukes and princesses, and for me, honestly, it was too. Until I learned about farmers and common folks. And that's when the bug bite. So today, let's have a talk about some periods that I really like. Aside from the fact that, well, we will also talk about it. A little heads up before we continue though. Most of my history material have been coming from the British media, so there might possibly be many discrepancies between one story to another. And more often, I was talking about things that was interesting for me, not much about the facts, so take it as a storytelling instead of a gospel. In any case, let's talk about it. Whilst prehistoric may have many more interesting stories, I think medieval, or more known as Tudor period, maybe is the one period that I was interested in. I suppose at this point it feels like a mix of two cultures of pagan and Christianity. Actually, what makes it interesting? The way they name the days after names of saints makes me wonder if some of the days in the Gregorian calendar is actually coming from them. It's not actually. I've read about them. Of course, common holidays like Easter and Christmas still exist, but it will begin with Lent, a 40 days of fasting, and by saying fasting, it means not eating red meats like pork and beef. So they resort to, you guess it, fishes, which is somehow beaver is also a fish. We'll get there eventually, I guess. By this point, farmers would live within a parish, around monastery church. There will be a communal center where markets and pubs will be, and pubs becoming a place of deals shall it be, which I believe still happening even today. Houses, especially farmers' house, usually are quite a big house, and of course, because it was meant for both the farmer and their servants, they also bake their own bread, brew their own ale, and like one sustainable community living under one roof. Yes, farmers have servants. There is no way they could manage all the lands and the sheep and other livestock alone. So they have some servants and maids. And oh dearie me, especially dairy maids. They are always becoming girls' dream to marry. Clean and quiet and content. Soft silky hands to touch, mostly because they have to deal with sensitive materials. In this case, milk. And while we are at it, wool are the most popular commodity in the Tudor period, as it seems like the British wool were better than the continental ones and sold in a high price. Although in Tudorian era, most of its wool were sold to monastery, which makes me say, However though, let's not forget the fact that in this time the world isn't that great. The Black Death is still common, doctors are to be expected, but housewives who knows about the herbs, and so on and so forth. There is plenty of reason to be wary, but let's face it, if your life expectancy was under 50 years anyway, for heaven's sake, so to speak, just enjoy it. Victorian may be the one time which everyone is remembering upon. After all, the Victorian era is the time when innovation seems to be never ending. Of course, that's only real in city. In the rural areas, it's pretty much almost the same. Though ranges or cooktops, as we know nowadays, were changed from, just usual pot with feet to flat bottom pot because your ranges are now coal colored. It also allows you to bake breads in your own little farmhouse, and by this time, farmers no longer have servants. Instead, they have the help from the inventions that has happened during the Victorian era. Machinery pulled by horses. Well, that's kind of already existed since the medieval era, but definitely got more advanced as the time goes along. Of course, tractors do exist at the time, but it's really expensive, costing up to multiple years of farmers' wage per farming season. So the horses remain, and let's face it, The manners also was needed and from land anyway, so it still is a win-win situation. However, this is the time when the British Empire was also expanding, in which festivals around the Empire Day was celebrated. Aside from that, their produce is not just meats and grains. They also have market garden in which they planted strawberries and harvest almost wild daffodils to be sent to London, which is formerly impossible. Now becomes possible thanks to the train that goes from the Scottish Highlands in the north to the Wales in the south. This is also the time when they started to experiment with fish. Again. Although by that I mean artificially growing them in a pond, which already done since Roman period, but let's carry on. Aside from that, there are still many things that was not that great. Medicine was still in its early development, which, as you might expect, still scarily random, also sometimes radioactive. But aside from that, the world of Edwardian era does come close with many new inventions and technology to go forward. If not that, this Tismate is definitely terrifying. We've now talked about two historical human periods that I think was rather interesting. Both are happened in Britain and in the view of the farmer. And most of this perspective actually comes from these two documentary series about Tudorian and Edwardian farmers. They are also have Victorian and wartime, as in World War II era, of farmers. In Wolfenland, we would incorporate both horses, or in Wolfenland's case, demi-horses would work in tandem with their packs of horses to work together. And most of them are working as farmers anyway, so there's not that much of an incentive to work with machines, other than because it's faster and to let the horse rest. All in all though, to see history through the perspective of a farmer, and in a way or another, a peasant was actually interesting. They are those who will not be recorded in the history books, but because Britain keep books, they keep the census back to the late medieval period. That's all for now. I hope this also interests you a little bit of the history of our society, especially yours. And for now, we'll have to part again, but hopefully I will meet you again soon. And if you found the Black tutorial, remember to run a mile. Take care out there.